Hey, my name is Rowan Smith and I want to welcome you to the Training for Trekking podcast. Now, this is the world's very first podcast which is entirely dedicated to helping you train, prepare and conquer your upcoming hike, trek or mountain adventure. So once a week, I'm going to be giving you quality and practical information on the subjects of physical preparation for trekking, dealing with altitude and nutrition on the trail, so you can know everything you need to be doing to have the best chance of a safe, enjoyable and successful adventure. So now you know what you're in for, let's get into today's episode. So today we are talking about how hikers can get strong without putting on extra weight in muscle. So strength training for hikers is absolutely amazing. As I always say, it's so good for preventing injury on the trail, for improvement movement efficiency, for helping you on the ascents and descents, and a whole bunch of other things. And in all honesty, all hikers should be doing it. However, one objection I often hear from hikers, trekkers, and mountaineers is that they don't want to do strength training purely because they don't want to put on any extra muscle mass, which they have to lug around on the trail. And, that is fair enough because hikers as a whole are a bit obsessive about dropping weight, whether it's in their gear, their food, or even their water, which I do not recommend, by the way. But we all know the difference between an extra kilo or two can make while we're on the trail. But even though carrying an extra kilo of muscle is usually a bit different than carrying an extra kilo in your pack, I completely understand this hesitation. So today I'm going to be explaining a little bit about this topic, and with a really science-backed and proven process in which you can get strong for hiking, but without having to put on an extra gram of muscle. Now, before I go any further, if you are concerned about this, in all honesty, you probably don't need to be, because it is quite hard to put on muscle as a whole. And if you are a relative to beginner to strength training, as many hikers are, I would say this following this advice that I'm about to explain isn't outrageously important for you, and you're probably better off just following a general strength training program. And even if you do put on a tiny bit of extra muscle, maybe it's a kilo or something, it's probably not really going to weigh you down that much on the trail. But however, if you are one of those people who genetically just have to look at a weight and they magically put on 5 kilos of muscle, or if you're a relatively experienced trainer who just loves to go hard in their training and don't want to worry about, that extra weight that you're going to put on, this is going to be a bit more relevant. So this is probably a bit more based around you guys. But now, without that all being said, how is it even possible for you to get strong without putting on muscle? Well, when it comes to gaining strength, the body can get stronger in about 2 different ways in general. Now, the most commonly known thing is an increase in muscle, specifically just an increase in muscle fiber size. And it really comes down to the more of these muscle fibers you have, the more force you can produce, meaning the stronger you are. Now, before someone calls me out on this, yes, just because someone looks like they have a lot of muscle doesn't exactly mean that they are stronger than the guy standing next to them. You can increase a lot of other things inside your muscle, which can make you look bigger, which a lot of the training that bodybuilders do, but that's not really relevant to what we're talking about today, so I'm going to leave that there. But that's number one, just simply increasing the muscle fiber size. Now, on the other hand, you can get stronger by improving the connection between your brain and your muscles. Now, basically, when your body is challenged with a particular task, the brain wants to create more and more efficient connections between itself and the muscles so it can better do that task in the future. Now, this allows you to use more of the current muscles you actually have for any given task, meaning if you are trying to pick up a weight right now, you're probably not using all the muscles you're holding on your body. However, if you pick up that weight multiple times and then come back in a week, you're going to use more of the actual muscles to do that task, so it feels easier. And then also to just use them more efficiently. So your muscles are just using, being a bit more efficient in their movement. They're using less energy. They're all working together as a whole to try and lift that weight. Now, this is the type of strength that hikers really want, because you can get phenomenally strong developing this, but you don't have to put on extra muscle. And if you ever met anyone in the world or seen people on TV and they're this tiny little guy, particularly climbers, like climbers are a great example here, and they're absolutely scrawny, wiry people, but then they can do these phenomenal, outrageous feats of strength. This is where most of their strength is coming from. So now that you know it's possible, how can you actually do it? Well, the common myth here, which I see all the time from people on the internet, is say, if you don't want to put on muscle, just lift light weights for lots of repetitions. Now, these recommendations come from, apparently training experts. They come from celebrities. You see it in magazines, on the internet, everywhere. It drives me mental. But basically, these people just do not know what they're talking about. And this recommendation is not right. Yes, it can work, but mainly because you're just not really pushing your body at all. And you might be lifting these tiny weights again and again and again and again. But you're spending all this time, you're not really getting any benefits or any improvements, at least in regards to injury prevention, movement efficiency, and all that other good stuff that we often talk about with strength training. And yes, there are periods where lifting lighter weights for high repetitions is going to be good for a hiker, 100% for developing muscular endurance. But that's a different kettle of fish. And if you're literally limiting your training and the intensity of your training just to stop putting muscle mass on, that's not a really good way of going about it. Instead, there's a really science-backed process in which you can do this, and it basically covers a few different steps. Now, number one, the majority of your strength training you want to be doing in the 3 to 6 repetition range. Now, what that means is you're going to be choosing a weight which you simply lift 3 times, 4 times, 5 times, or 6 times in a row, and then you're going to rest. And then you do it again, then you're going to rest, then you do that again, and you rest. Now, the reason behind this is basically most training prescriptions are broken up into rep ranges. So you'll see someone saying do 10 repetitions of this, do 5 repetitions of this, do 20 repetitions of this. And the idea behind this is, each different rep range gives this sort of different response to the muscles. Without going into too much detail, the 3 to 6 repetition range generally doesn't stimulate muscle growth. However, it's incredibly effective at improving that neuromuscular efficiency. Now, if you're an intermediate trainer and you're coming into your training, so you've been doing it for a few months, and you're like, 3 to 6 repetitions, that's going to be outrageously heavy weights. I don't know if I'm ready for that. It doesn't have to be super heavy. It's basically something that's going to be challenging for you to do for this 3 to 6 repetitions, but it's just everyone's an individual here. So for me, I might pick up a weight and I might do a deadlift at 6 repetitions for 100 kilos, and the person next to me might be doing a deadlift at 6 repetitions for 30 kilos. Everyone's got very different strength sets, and it's basically just depending on where you're at and just trying to stick to that range. Now, going on top of that is you never really want to reach failure, meaning you never want to reach that point where you literally can't lift another set. You never want to reach that point where you're simply grinding out a repetition at the end to sort of reach that 6, and the last one you're really straining. Now, yes, this can be super effective about improving muscle strength, but if you're worried about putting on muscle size, this isn't probably your best bet. Instead, probably keep always 1 or 2 repetitions in reserve. So if you were doing, say, 6 repetition exercise, you choose a weight which you could do at the very limit of your strength for about 8 repetitions or something like that. Now, the idea behind this is muscle failure is one of the stimuluses for muscle growth. So we simply just want to avoid that. And then the question goes hand in hand with this is, can you still get strong without going to the limit? And it goes into that old mentality of no pain, no gain. And 100% you can. Now, very rarely will I ask my clients to try and get to that failure point. There's some of the strongest people and the best weightlifters in the world who will literally train for months and months leading up to a competition, and they will never miss a repetition and hit that failure point. Sure, they'll be working hard, but they'll never get to that stage. And then when they get on, the competition, maybe they'll make it, maybe they'll not. But it's just an example to say you don't have to kill yourself into the ground to get stronger. It's simply not necessary. On top of that, you want to be having quite long rest periods in between your exercises. So you want to be having at least 2 minutes in between each sort of strength exercise you do, or each time you do a certain strength exercise. The idea behind that is if you go less than that, sometimes that can be a little bit extra fatiguing for the muscles. It won't let it recover properly. It'll build up in waste products, which can be another stimulus for increased muscle strength. Again, for most people, it's probably not that much of a worry, but for those people who really worry about this, that's something you want to look at. In saying this, 2-minute rest periods, most people will just sort of sit on their phone in the gym or just wander around, and I wouldn't recommend that. Your training time's precious, and it's usually, I recommend those 2-3 minutes in between exercises, fill that up with other stuff. If you're doing a lower body strength exercise and you're resting for that, maybe do an upper body strength exercise and you rest, or do some mobility or some core or some prehab or some rehab or breathing exercises or whatever, but use that time efficiently. Don't just sit on your phone because it's such a waste of time, and your training time is precious. On top of that, you want to be limiting your training volume. So training volume is basically how much weight or how many exercises you're doing in a session and in a week. That's one of the big stimulus for hypertrophy, which is muscle growth. So just choose maybe 2 to 4 exercises if you're trying to get strong. Work hard on them, do like 3 to 5 to 6 sets, something like that, and leave it there instead of doing the old bodybuilding way, which you still see so many hikers do, where they're going and just doing 8 to 10 strength exercises and just spending an hour or 2 in the gym. It's just not necessary, and it's not great if you're trying to avoid muscle growth. And then finally, probably one of the most important things on this is calorie control as well. So we often talk about calories when it comes to weight loss, in which you need to be consuming less calories than you need day to day in order to lose weight. So meaning, your body asks for a certain amount of calories in the day. If you consume less than that, your body's going to have to find energy from somewhere, so it burns off fat. Alternatively, if you're trying to put on muscle, you have to go the other way. So you have to eat more calories than you need day to day, and that'll put on weight or put on muscle. If you're trying to perform at your best, but also trying to ensure you don't put on weight, you need to be eating calories which is completely on the level of what you need, but no more than that. And ideally no less than that, because you want to be fueling yourself sufficiently to perform at your best. So it takes a little bit of figuring out. I would recommend, if you are going down this route and you are worrying about weight control, talk to a professional. So look up Kyle from Valley to Peak Nutrition, who's been on this podcast a few times. He's great at this. Sit down, get your energy requirements worked out so you can know what type of food and how much food you need to be eating day to day, because this is really, really significant when it comes to weight control. And even if you ignore all the other tips from today and you simply maintain your calories, so you're not eating too much, you're not eating too little, and you're just on that maintenance, it'll probably save you from putting on weight through your training. And it's, a really, really good route to go down. So I highly recommend talk to a professional on that, get that sorted, and then follow their advice about putting that to action, because it can make a big difference. And that's about it, in all honesty, guys. There are a few other points that go into this, and I wouldn't say in this type of situation you would neglect your muscular endurance training, which is that higher repetition training. But as a whole, if you're trying to get strong and you are worried about putting on extra muscle mass, follow these rules and you will be pretty safe. So I hope you've enjoyed that today, guys. I hope you got a little bit out of it, a little bit more advanced training technique today than the usual stuff, but hopefully you've all gotten through it and gotten some value out of it. As always, if you have enjoyed this podcast today, please, I would love if you could leave me a review, whether it's on Apple iTunes, whether it's on Google, whether it's on wherever you listen to this podcast. I'd really, really appreciate it. So that's enough from me today, guys, and we'll talk to you very, very soon. Bye.